So yesterday we talked a little bit about my predictions for Microsoft's E3 press conference, and a few hours after that press conference, this coming Monday, is going to be EA's press conference, and for most people that watched last year, EA was probably the most disappointing, I guess. It didn't have much actual content within it. They said they'd announced 6 new games before the press conference, and the 6 games were either conceptual or known about, or just things that we kind of expect from EA. And while I don't think EA is gonna pull out any surprises or anything this year, I mean, it's definitely gonna be a better lineup, and we're definitely gonna see a lot more than we did last year, and that's probably better. But I got 3 predictions right now for EA. The first one is that the show is going to be divided into 3 sections. The first is just going to be EA Sports. They tend to do this anyway. They might split up a little bit. I remember last year they had a bit of a break between the UFC game and some of the other ones. I know, but they tend to group a few of them together to make sure that they're all just generally in the same space. But this section that I think they're going to split off and have is their focus on it is probably gonna be Star Wars, because they have at least 2 and possibly even 3 games this year. The first of which is Star Wars Battlefront, which we learned about 2 years ago, that was in development by DICE, and we saw a little bit of in-game footage at last E3, and then in-game footage trailer at the Star Wars, the big Star Wars event that happened earlier this year. Gameplay was also shown there, but it wasn't open to the public, or wasn't available to the public, so I have not seen it, and, well, most people haven't, so we're really hoping that we see the gameplay. I mean, it comes out this year, so that's pretty much expected. The second game we know is coming for Star Wars is from Visceral Games, which is headed by Amy Hennig of Uncharted fame, is going to be handling the scripting for that, so everyone's really excited. There's a bit of hints that it might be focused around Han Solo. I mean, it doesn't really matter what they do, everyone's gonna like it, I'm pretty sure, or at least be excited about it. I mean, the Uncharted games are really well written. I mean, you can make qualms about their gameplay, but the writing has always been top notch, and just add in Star Wars, and it's pretty much one of the easiest winning combos you can put together. The third Star Wars game they might actually have is I think it's from BioWare, and BioWare well known for Knights of the Old Republic and the Old Republic MMO. So there's definitely a history there. Whether or not that we know that there's also a new IP I think they're working on. So if that new IP is Star Wars, then I guess you get that. I'm not sure exactly what they're gonna do. It should be interesting to see. So yeah, the 3 sections will be that: Star Wars, EA Sports, and then basically everything else. So the second prediction is that this is kind of my dumb one that I think could be really great. Is if everyone remembers last E3, they had a PGA Tour shown off, and it was just a guy it was hitting a golf ball over a battleship in the middle of Warzone, just showing off fantasy stuff. And I'm assuming the PGA Tour games just needed that, because I mean, PGA is kind of boring, and it makes sense to try to do something crazy. But they actually have another franchise that is probably selling worse and doing worse, and everyone kind of hates more, which is NBA Live. And so what I want to see from them, I predict they do something weird with it, but what I want to see is they just turn it into Space Jam. It just goes straight up into space. Just ignores everything else. Just go straight into space. I want to see a basketball court, on the moon. Hell, I mean, they could take the golf game. They could take the next PGA Tour game out of the moon, and then to put Tiger Woods in it, so that you can remake that commercial that was made a few years ago. Tiger Woods coughing on the moon. All I'm saying is just EA, put some of your sports games on the moon. It'll work out for you. I promise. The final prediction, which I go into a little bit more detail in the article, is that we aren't going to see any games that we didn't already know about. I mean, you can make claims that they're announcing Mass Effect 4 or whatever, but we saw that stuff last year. The closest thing to a real announcement we might have is going to be whatever BioWare is working on, which we know they've announced that they have been working on something. We just don't know exactly what. And also, we know that Ghost Games is working on a Need for Speed game, and it's Need for Speed. So car racing games generally don't do anything crazy. Besides like Driver San Francisco, and I'm not sure they do that because it's more like a reboot to the series. So I don't see there being any surprises. The only game that they could come out with and like reveal and be like, oh, look at this, is Titanfall 2. And I mean, they don't need to. They have everything else. They have Star Wars, they have Mass Effect, they have Mirror's Edge. I mean, it makes more sense just to save it for next year when I don't know what they're gonna have. They might still have Mirror's Edge, but they're gonna lose Star Wars. They're gonna lose. I mean, they're gonna probably ship Mass Effect by then, maybe. They have so much this year. They just don't need to do it. So I don't think we see any games that we haven't heard about from last E3 or like saw coming. I mean, if you remember last year, one or two of the 6 games they announced was either stuff that was leaked or stuff that was like expected of them, like a sports title. And yeah, that's gonna be the same thing this year, but like they're gonna have more gameplay than they did last year. Like most of those trailers last year were all footage, just not even footage really. Half the time it was just them talking about an idea for a game, and it not helping anyone realize what they were trying to put out. So I think they're gonna stick to what they did last year, except do it better, and it'll work. Because out of like the 7 press conferences, I think they're like the 3rd or 4th one I'm most excited for. The rest are I'm kind of iffy on. It's not to say that they don't have good things. It's just like from start to finish, there's just games that I want to see more from EA for once than I want to see from some of the other companies. So, likely an hour or less after EA's press conference is going to be the Ubisoft press conference, and making predictions for Ubisoft is actually kind of harder than most other companies. Usually, if you look at companies like EA or Sony or Nintendo, they all have different development teams that are working on something in particular, and you kind of know what they're going to be doing and when the last game they released was. But the thing with Ubisoft is that they always have several different development teams all working on the same project. I think Assassin's Creed has like 3 or 4 development teams as the main teams, but they also have like several others just doing side things. So when I did the research for all of these articles, Ubisoft was kind of the last one I did because I could look at the rest of the companies and kind of easily predict what they were going to do. Ubisoft, I couldn't. What I ended up having to do was just look at their schedule of releases for like the last 5 or 6 years and just kind of see what schedule they're on. I think that might be the way to kind of read them, because Ubisoft, if you recall, I think their president at some point said that they don't want to introduce any new IP unless they can make it into a franchise. And we see that with stuff with like annualized franchises such as Assassin's Creed. We see stuff like Far Cry games coming out every few years, Call of Juarez games coming out every few years, which is actually one of the games I think is going to show up. But they also own several franchises that just don't do anything, which is going to lead me into my first prediction, which is that we see a side-scrolling Prince of Persia game announced at E3. Ubisoft does own the rights to Prince of Persia. They released the reboot, I guess, is what you could call it, back in 2008, and then they had another one something Sans or whatever a few years later. I think it was 2010 or so. They haven't had a side-scrolling Prince of Persia game in a long time. A 2D, like, because that was the original. I think the first few sequels after that. But I think the main obstacle they've had is that Prince of Persia kind of feels similar in design, I guess, to Assassin's Creed. I mean, there's movement, there is swordplay, and there is parkour, and there's a very similar case there. And if you've been paying attention, Ubisoft has been putting out these kind of 2.5D Assassin's Creed games set in China, Japan, and I think the last one was India. So three countries that everyone kind of wanted an Assassin's Creed game to take place in, like a main one, not these side-scrolling ones. So I think that's been the main reason they haven't been putting out Prince of Persia, is because it's just kind of more of Assassin's Creed, and they'd rather focus on that main franchise. And I guess even if Prince of Persia side-scrolling were kind of like the Assassin's Creed's kind of side-scrolling, I don't think anyone would care, because it's a franchise that they haven't been paying attention to that much, and everyone's kind of bored with Assassin's Creed. So if they wanted to, I think they could easily get away with putting out another Prince of Persia game, a side-scrolling one. Would definitely, I mean, like, even it'd be a throwback game, and people really like those, especially in the last few years. And people have been calling for a Prince of Persia game for a long time. I mean, it's a series that was very beloved for many years, and I think the few that came out during the PS2 and I guess early PS3 era were like really well liked, especially Sands of Time. So going back to something like that, even if the side-scrolling especially, I think would be really interesting for them, especially with the UbiArt technology that they have. I mean, those games they put out with that Rayman, Child of Light, and this what was the game? It wasn't this War of Mine. It was that World War II game with the UbiArt. I can't remember. Valiant Hearts. That was it. Should have remembered their catchy poem that they had during their conference. So yeah, that would be really great. Second prediction then is that Ubisoft's presser is the most boring event out of all 7, and I mean, I don't think they have a lot to show off, to be honest. And of the games that we know about, there are 2 Assassin's Creed games, 2 Tom Clancy games, Just Dance, which comes out every year as well, and then Toy Soldiers War Chest, which I haven't really heard much of, and I'm not sure how many people even care about that game. But yeah, it's like Assassin's Creed Chronicles, which is the side-scrolling ones I just talked about, or referenced when talking about Prince of Persia. Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which I'm not sure anyone cares about, considering how badly Ubisoft flopped, and Ubisoft flopped with Unity, and Syndicate kind of just looks like more of that without the co-op. I mean, I'm not sure I care enough, or most people care enough. It's just more Assassin's Creed. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege looks like an interesting take on shooter genre, I guess. There seems to be a lot more shooting games, FPS games, that take place in a more urban, local just setting, not actual warfare, rather like SWAT teams, police, stuff like that. We had Battlefield Hardline last year from EA, or technically this year. And the Division, which I'm not sure any of us even know if it's going to come out this year or next year or the year after that. It's been around for a few years now, and there's not really any sign that it's close to being done. Of course, Ubisoft they'll show it off, and they'll have their pretty cheesy, fake team chat. That should be another great demo, I'm sure. So there are a few games that I think that they've had a lot of time to put together since the last entry, but they're kind of games I think I'm not sure are that big for them. Though one of them is Rayman, which it's been a few years since Rayman Legends released. I remember that first got delayed on the Wii U. It was originally just for Wii U, and then because the Wii U wasn't selling well, they ended up porting it to everything else. So I think it's been enough time that they can show off a new one or just release the new one by the end of the year. The Ubi art style is always great, and I think that it really speeds up development to have that already in place. Speaking of Ubi art, I think they'll probably have another game out. They seem to be putting quite a few of those out, like just small teams coming together and putting out games like that. We had Child of Light and Valiant Hearts this past year. I think we could have one or even two more games like that coming out. It would not surprise me whatsoever. I had mentioned earlier, I believe, that I think Call of Juarez will probably get a new entry. I'm pretty sure people like the last one. I never got to play it, but I'm not sure how excited people will actually get at the E3 show floor to see that. And the last thing is a Trials game, which they'll spend a short amount of time on and then ignore, I guess. I mean, it's a Trials game. I mean, they're a little bit fun. There's just ripoffs, I guess, all over the internet, or maybe they're the ripoff. I'm not sure. I mean, the only possible way that they're gonna make their conference into something remotely interesting at this point is if they announce Beyond Good and Evil 2 is gonna show up, and I don't think that's gonna happen. So, yeah, I think it's going to be the most boring out of all 7 of those events. I think Square Enix is going to be a lot better. I think that Nintendo and Microsoft and Sony are going to be a lot better. I think EA is going to be a lot better. I mean, I've already talked about them. I know you, so you should know why. And think Bethesda is going to be better. I think there's no way that Ubisoft tops them, even with Beyond Good and Evil 2. If that actually shows up, I don't think they're going to have enough. I don't think there's any way. My last prediction is, in this video that has gone much longer than the other two, is that Dean Evans' new game. Dean Evans is the guy that directed Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, and I think he'd been given his own project, and he'd been basically, I think in an interview he said that he'd basically been given the reins and he's basically allowed to do whatever he wants, make the game that he wants to make. And so the prediction is that Dean Evans' new game shows up and then just blows everything else out of the water. I don't think any of the games that I've discussed up to this point and talked about, and even in the article, or that Ubisoft would have had the time to start putting together, aren't any way gonna be close to whatever Dean Evans comes up with. That guy is crazy. We've seen some really cool stuff, possible conceptual artwork from him, like robots and oh my god, I am so excited for whatever he puts out. Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon was so cool. It's such a great way to just mix up the series, and I wish more companies would do something like that because it was such a smart idea. So yeah, if he shows up and he has a game at Ubisoft's press conference, I think it is going to be the best thing there, and nothing else is going to come close whatsoever. That will be my predictions for Ubisoft. Next up, we'll have Sony. I am recording these all ahead of time, so I'm not exactly sure when everything is going to be up. It could definitely be a long time, but we'll see it then. So now, yeah, Ubisoft's done, Sony's next, then Nintendo, and then Square Enix. See y'all later.